Happy Friday, folks. Senior Editor Mackenzie DeLulo here, and welcome back to the Texans Weekly Roundup podcast. This week, the team discusses Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's 30 priorities for the Senate this session, 2 similar bills to mandate and subsidize the production of dispatchable generation, the 2019 El Paso Walmart shooting suspect pleading guilty to over 90 offenses, a bill to create a fund to subsidize water supply for lesser populated areas of Texas, the Texas State Teachers Association promoting a week of action for Black History Month, the state of Texas challenge to federal Waters of the United States regulations, Attorney General Ken Paxton joining a lawsuit against the ATF over pistol braces, the Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol chief testifying to Congress that the U.S. lacks capacity to handle illegal immigrants, the 2 Texas Democrats in Congress who opposed allowing non-citizens to vote in local D.C. elections, Texas lawmakers asking Paxton to investigate the city of Dallas over its new abortion resolution, the Medina County Republican Party censuring a Republican congressman, the firing of Austin City Manager Spencer Cronk and his nearly $500,000 severance package, and the San Antonio City Council using eminent domain to build an expansion of the Alamo Museum. As always, if you have questions for our team, DM us on Twitter or email us at editor@thetexan.news. Thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Well, howdy, folks. It's Mackenzie, Hayden, Matt, Brad, and Cameron. We're all here. I've already been put in my place, being told my jokes are not funny so far this morning. So I'm doing great.
Put in your place. I think that makes us sound a lot more evil than we really are.
Well, because Hayden, anyway, I was like, Hayden, you should mention this on the podcast. And he was like, man, I don't want to be like left out to dry. I want folks, I want to know it's going to go over well. And I was like, you guys leave me hanging all the time when I tell jokes.
Because you said, Hayden, I want you to say that thing that you just said about Elon Musk, and we're all going to go, ha, ha, ha. And I thought, what if they don't? And then I just told this joke like I thought it was funny, and then nobody laughs.
People are going to think this podcast is so staged after this conversation that anything we talk about is like prepared beforehand.
Well, that's what I do.
It's all scripted. We're frauds.
We're frauds.
Before we go on, I just go on ChatGPT and say, write a script for the podcast.
Exactly.
And then I read that.
I just recently learned what ChatGPT is. It's incredible.
Oh my gosh. I've been going on it for the past few weeks, and they've been attempting to jailbreak it. Because right now ChatGPT, it's only allowed to give certain responses, but people have been putting in different prompts,
trying to get it to go rogue.
Exactly, and they've been successful, but the developers have been patching some of these responses so it can kind of go back to base level. But people on the internet, they're way too smart for that. So
that's crazy. That makes me laugh. It's way above my pay grade, but regardless. Anyways, Hayden, didn't you see something on Twitter this week about...
Oh, we're still going to do it?
You mentioned it. It was funny.
Well, I didn't see it this week. It was a long time ago. Stephen Colbert made a joke that Elon Musk needed to either change his name or come up with a line of men's cologne.
I actually think it's really funny. And it was just as funny the second time. Oh,
no, that's why it was funny when I originally told it, but I was afraid we wouldn't be able to replicate it. So
Hayden, I laugh at everything. I'm poor at many things, but I'm a very good audience for the most part. Oh, that's pretty funny.
Very good audience for my stand-up comedy routines. Practicing for a stand-up comedy career that will never, ever happen.
Oh, wait. Was that poorly timed?
No, it was perfect.
Okay.
That was good.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, this has already been delightful. Let's move on to the news. Matt, we're actually going to start with you.
Uh-oh.
The highly anticipated legislative priorities for the Texas Senate were released this past week from Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's office, revealing a lot of insight on what direction the session is going to go in. Talk us through what the Lieutenant Governor had to say.
Well, Monday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick released the priorities for the Texas Senate, showing what the top 30 bills would be. In releasing the priorities, Patrick took time to elaborate on how, during his time in office as Lieutenant Governor, he's increased the number of priority bills, but also explained that just because an issue didn't make that list of top 30 issues, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be passed, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to be a priority. And kind of explained how there's a lot of important issues facing the state, but he's got to pick 30 top ones. So here you go. Anyway, he added that most will pass with bipartisan support, which I thought was a interesting little addition at the end of the press release, because a lot of issues that were contained in the priorities are shared issues with the Republican Party of Texas, whether part of the platform or part of their legislative priorities, namely increasing the offense of illegal voting to a felony, banning child gender modification, prohibiting obscene material in public schools and public school libraries, and school choice issues. Now, I thought we could take a quick look at the 30 different bills and run through them in my auctioneer voice. Senate Bill 1, of course, is the state budget. Senate Bill 2 is restoring voter fraud to felony. 3, increasing the homestead exemption. That's something that Patrick's talked quite extensively on, how during his time as lieutenant governor, he's increased it up to I believe we're about 45,000 where it is now, and he wants to up it to 70,000. Additional property tax relief, increasing the business property tax exemption, adding natural gas plants, continuing to improve the electric grid. Number 8 is the school choice measure. Number 9 is increased teacher pay. 10's the 13th check for teachers, keeping our schools safe and secure. That's the school security measure, banning children's exposure to drag shows, protecting children from obscene books in libraries, ending child gender modification, protecting women's sports, banning critical race theory. I'm a slow auctioneer. Have you noticed? I
was going to say, where's the auctioneer voice? You also sound bored reading them. You sound like you were bored out of your mind reading these 30 items.
I'm sorry. It's been a long week. The diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in higher education, ending academic tenure, removing district attorneys, removing judges, rural law enforcement assistance, and a host of other issues that you can check out and read on the Texan.news. Did you see what I did there, Mackenzie?
I did. You plugged it. I love it. I love a good website plug. It's my favorite kind of little segue on the pod here. Very true. Worth going and checking out. A good mix of, Republican Party priorities with some of, Patrick's more niche issues like rural law enforcement funding. And
lots of spicy issues that we can Texas ledge over in the coming days.
Exactly. Bring it on. Thank you, Matt. Brad, we're coming to you. Some notable bill filings this week included 3 pertaining to ERCOT, 2 specifically address building new natural gas generation. Talk to us about the details.
State Senator Charles Perry, Republican out of Lubbock, and State Rep Matt Shaheen, Republican out of Plano, have filed similar but not quite identical bills to create an electric generating facility fund that would subsidize the construction of dispatchable generators on the ERCOT power grid. ERCOT, of course, makes up just over 90% of the state's power grid use. There are 2 other regional power grids that touch far east Texas and far west Texas in the Panhandle. So this strategy tracks with one of Lieutenant Governor Patrick's priorities, that is ensuring new natural gas generators will be built in the coming years to cope with growing population. However, among the Senate's priority slate announced this week, SB 6 is aimed at that end as well, building new natural gas generation specifically. Not sure how these will compare with that more blessed version, but it may be very similar to the final outcome. But this is an increasingly used strategy because of this massive surplus that far exceeds the spending cap, the ability to spend all this money. So they have to, quote, get creative. And one of that is amending the Constitution to create these funds with which they can disperse and use for specific purposes. So we're going to see that used a lot, I think, this year.
There was another bill filed this week that would pair closely with these other proposals. Give us those details. So
where these previous 2 versions hope to incentivize the development of natural gas plants through subsidization, HB 2288 by Representative Jared Patterson, Republican out of Frisco, would attack the issue more directly. His bill would prohibit the sale of renewable generated electricity on the ERCOT market after 2030. The argument by Patterson and those on his side on this issue is that renewable companies undercut the prices of thermal generators on the market because of lower prices due to both zero fuel cost, doesn't cost anything to harvest rays from the sun or the wind. And also those two sources get massive government subsidies, specifically the production tax credit from the federal government. That's the largest of all of these subsidies. And so this is trying to basically set an end date on when the PUC in the state must do whatever it's going to do to eliminate the over-reliance, as they see it, on renewable power and build more natural gas generation. And so setting this hard deadline would conceivably force the issue. We see no other discussion of this kind of thing from like the PUC, but it's something to watch, especially if it can gain any traction in the legislature. But right now, a lot of focus is on the performance credit mechanism that we've talked a lot about. And Patterson is one of many different legislators who have expressed concern or outright criticism of the performance credit mechanism and its ability to actually accomplish what state regulators want, which is building new natural gas or other dispatchable power generators.
There you go. Brad, thank you for your coverage. Hayden, a federal case against the perpetrator of the 2019 El Paso shooter is coming to a resolution. Tell us about his guilty plea.
Last week, the perpetrator of the 2019 shooting at an El Paso Walmart that claimed the lives of 23 people and hurt 22 others pleaded guilty to 90 federal crimes, and he could be sentenced to 90 consecutive life sentences. He agreed to that possibility, although his formal sentencing will take place at a later date that is to be scheduled by a federal judge. He was convicted of 45 hate crimes and 45 violations of federal firearm laws. He was convicted under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Acts, which was hate crime legislation, I believe, enacted in the early 2000s or late 90s. And the namesake of this bill, James Byrd Jr., was an African-American man. He was murdered in Jefferson County on account of his race. And the state of Texas has since executed two of the people who murdered Byrd. Matthew Shepard was a college student in Wyoming who was murdered because he was gay. That was an interesting case. The prosecutors had said that he was killed because he was being robbed. And then the defense lawyer argued that he was killed because he was gay, as if that somehow made it better. But those perpetrators were also convicted and sentenced to life in prison. So that's the background for the hate crime legislation that this shooter was convicted under, because this was not a garden variety crime. But obviously hate crime legislation is controversial because it classifies crimes different ways, but that's a rabbit trail that we won't get on right now. But so the sum and substance of it is he was convicted of 90 hate crimes or 90 federal offenses total. And that's in the federal system. He has not been tried yet on the state charges that he could face. So he is technically still facing the possibility of the death penalty because the state of Texas has not tried him yet, although the federal government declined to seek a death sentence. So he is only facing the specter of life in prison, and he is only in his mid-20s. So that would be 60 or 70 or 80 years in prison, however long he has left to live.
The Justice Department certainly had some strong words for this individual. What did the Attorney General Merrick Garland have to say?
Well, Attorney General Garland highlighted some of the disturbing pretext or pre-incident indicators in this case. The perpetrator was an admitted white supremacist who stated that his motive in killing these people was to deter Hispanic people from coming to the United States. He admitted that he hoped to kill everyone he shot. He shot 23, he killed 23 people and he shot 22 more. So he was bent on killing 45 or more people at that Walmart. And he posted a manifesto prior to the crime explaining his goals of killing Hispanic people. It's a terrible, just the worst type of crime. And the violence of this case was extreme. And Attorney General Garland pointed to all of that in the sentencing. But it seems that the federal case is reaching a resolution. Like I said, the formal sentencing is still to be scheduled.
Thank you, Hayden. Brad, we're coming to you. There was a bill filed pertaining to water supply projects by Senator Charles Perry. Tell us about it.
So similar in nature to his electricity fund we just discussed, Perry has proposed a Water for Texas fund that would facilitate financing for water supply and utility piping refurbishment projects for specifically rural areas defined as places with less than 10,000 people in population, and mid-sized cities defined as municipalities with up to 150,000 people in population. So the fund, if created, would be managed by the Texas Water Development Board, which is in charge of all of the mapping out the state's water plan, identifying projects that it will do, such as, take for instance, the Marvin Nichols Reservoir up in northeast Texas that would supply water to DFW mainly. We've written on that and talked about that before. But Perry told me he hopes for $3 billion total in this fund, $2 billion for the leaky pipes line item, and $1 billion for supply projects. But the final amount is not decided yet. As with all of this discussion around the surplus, nothing really is final. Probably the most materialized version or line item would be for property taxes. At least right now, it's identified as roughly $15 billion. Now, you can get into debate on how much of that applies to past property tax cuts and how much applies to the next set. But regardless, all of this money that is being proposed for expenditure from the surplus is very much up in the air. We don't know how much is going to go to each. So on this, Perry said it is estimated that over the next 50 years, our state could be short 7 million acre feet of water. That's how they measure water supply. It's about 2.2 trillion gallons. And according to the TWDB, over 136 billion gallons of water are lost each year to leaks in our infrastructure. It's time for the state to put up real investment in our water infrastructure and ensure Texas has sufficient water supply as we continue to grow.
Got it. So in terms of the big picture, how big of a need is a fund like this? According
to the Water Development Board, there are just over 1,300 planned projects in the state water plan for areas with less than 10,000 people. And if I recall correctly, the total number of projects was around 3,000. And so of the projects that fall within areas with 150,000 population or less, it's about 1,900. So they say that I asked them why this is such a big need for these smaller population areas. They said less populated or more rural areas tend to have smaller systems and fewer staff who often wear multiple hats in their roles. They may not have the staff resources that larger systems have, nor the funds readily available to invest in water projects. Smaller system means less revenue in fees, utility fees and whatnot. And then further in the quote, access to financial assistance through the state is essential to less populated areas being able to complete water infrastructure projects. So namely, as the state population booms and that spreads out across the state, its lagging water supply development must be addressed. Lawmakers are taking that view. It takes decades to build new reservoirs, such as the Marvin Nichols Reservoir that I mentioned. and they are often politically tense propositions entailing taking land from one area, building a reservoir, and using that water to supply an entirely different area. We get these regional fights in this, and that is among the many reasons why it's so difficult to build new water supply.
There you go. Bradley, thank you. Cameron, we are coming to you.
Yes.
The Texas State Teachers Association tweeted out some information on a week of action for Black History Month. What does this week of action mean?
So the TSTA, they tweeted out a link to something called a Imagination Lab Listening Project. Sounds great. Well, it was for 5 days of webinars. That was a direct link to an organization called Black Lives Matter at School. And so what's interesting about these webinars? Well, they were explicitly promoting things like celebrating globalism, Medicare for all. And I just thought this was kind of interesting to explore, because you would think the TSTA would be promoting things related to topics in school. But this was something that
this is being taught to teachers, or this is being taught to students?
This was for resources for teachers, so they can incorporate it into their classroom. So this was sort of a rabbit hole sort of story for me. You can follow it in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of information here. So some of this information you found tells a lot about, a bigger picture of what's being taught here in this week of action. What else did you find?
Well, like I was saying, you go down some rabbit holes with some of these stories, and this was one of them. So one of the speakers on their theme day on Tuesday was about celebrating globalism and collective value. Well, one of the speakers at this webinar was promoting ideas about neocolonialism and global racism. And so there was also a pre-reading for one of these webinars that connected you to a group called Equity or Else. And this group, Equity or Else, would promote ideas on this pre-reading that was about reallocating police budgets and promoting the idea homes for all. And so, again, following this trail as it goes along, the TSTA is also an affiliate of the National Education Association. Well, the NEA also posted an article about this week of action. And in this article, they were having a discussion with another teacher, and they were discussing the ideas of culturally relevant education and how to teach white supremacy, and or how to deal with white supremacy, rather. And so, as you can see, these, what were otherwise known as fringe ideas, are making their way into the mainstream of education and involved in the curriculum with the teachers in the classroom. So this is something I know the legislature has been paying attention to. We have been paying attention to here at the Texan. So just something to follow.
Certainly. And it's, these are some of the biggest, hottest political topics of the day being taught and kind of furthered in these organizations that directly impact what students are being taught.
That's exactly
at public
right.
schools. So interesting, important for the legislature to know about, and they'll continue to address it one way or another. Republicans and Democrats will have very different opinions on this. So thank you for that information. Gentlemen, President's Day is just around the corner. I do want to throw myself under the bus here. I, as a high school student, decided that I would learn. At the time, there were only 44 presidents. Hayden's looking at me because he knows. He's homeschooled as well. He just knows. A president's rap. So at one point, I could rap the 44 presidents.
You could rap them?
I could rap them.
That's incredible.
I found a rap on YouTube. I memorized it. And later on, I taught U.S. history for middle school students for a while, and it was a requirement that they learn it as well.
That's awesome.
Did they hate me for it? Absolutely. Did I make them sing it to me? Yes.
Did it work? Did they remember?
They did. Yeah. Well, and I just saw one of my former students at my sister's wedding recently, and he said he still remembered the Gettysburg Address, which I made them memorize, and the rap. And he's now like 20, in his early 20s, and living life and being a young professional. I took great pride in that. All that to say, for President's Day, I recommend you go listen to the rap and memorize it if you would like.
I will definitely be doing that.
Hayden.
I had a song, or I was taught a song to remember the presidents, but it definitely wasn't a rap. I will say that.
Do you have like do you guys know the 50 States song? Do you guys ever like, or preposition songs? This is all very homeschooled.
Yeah. Mac and I had a whole conversation one day about Shirley English.
Yeah. Which was called Shirley Grammar when
Shirley
I took
Grammar,
it.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, you may have had Shirley English. Mine was called Shirley Grammar.
Oh, they changed the name?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We aren't that far apart in age, so maybe I'm just old.
You know, it's a nerdy conversation when two people start bonding over the grammar curriculum that was used in 5th grade.
My Lanta. Peas in a pod. Regardless, because President's Day is coming up here at the Texan, we are going to offer you a discount just for this coming week. $60 for an annual subscription, which breaks down to $5 a month. There will be a link in the podcast description of wherever you are listening to this podcast. Make sure to go to thetexan.news. Check out an article for free if you want to, but this is a limited time offer, so we recommend you go take advantage of this $60 annual subscription today. Very important. Thank you, folks. Brad, we're going to turn to you here. Texas has sued the Biden administration over another EPA regulation. What's the issue here?
So the federal government is trying to push through a more strict version of the Waters of the United States, called colloquially WOTUS, regulation that would open the door for much broader regulation of property deemed to be connected in some fashion to, quote, navigable waterways. Now that definition is already quite broad, and but under the current, or under the application by the Biden administration, could be applied to drainage ditches that are not even filled with water year round. How that is a navigable waterway beats the heck out of me, but hey, that's the issue at hand. And so Paxton, Attorney General Paxton, the state of Texas, have sued the Biden administration over this. The Attorney General said when filing it, quote, "The environmental extremists who wrote this unlawful rule have no interest in respecting our sovereignty or our natural resources. For this administration, this isn't about environmental protection. It's about federal control over states like Texas, and we aren't going to allow it." The EPA's intent in this this broader regulation is to more effectively prevent pollution in bodies of water, whether it's streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, the ocean, anything like that. And so that's kind of that intent often, and we'll talk about an example of this in a second, often clashes with property rights, just like the issue of eminent domain does. And so those are basically the two sides of the coin here, and we'll see where it goes. But the state of Texas is once again suing the federal government.
Surprise, surprise. Is it just Paxton opposing this?
No. So the Texas Farm Bureau has joined a lawsuit opposing the rule with the American Farm Bureau. A spokesman told me about that. The rule is so broad, in any place where water collects and flows, even if it's dry most of the time, could be left to federal government regulation. And the bigger challenge in this is that this proposal comes just before the U.S. Supreme Court will make a decision in the case Sackett v. EPA. And that issue centers on this couple in Idaho who purchased a plot of land by Priest Lake up in the Panhandle in 2004, roughly, I think. And they were going to build their home on this land, but the EPA came by once they started the plans. It's almost began to break ground and said, "No, you're not allowed. This is land that's adjacent to a navigable waterway." Now, if you look at the map, and I linked to it in the piece if you want to see it, Reason Magazine drew up a diagram of it, but the property is surrounded on three sides by houses and then a drainage ditch on the fourth. And between the lake and the house, or the prospective house, the plot of land for the Sacketts, are like a dozen houses. So this is not a new, while would be a new development on this plot of land, there are already multiple houses in this area. And so it's a really strange situation. The Sacketts have already won about a decade ago in court, actually at the Supreme Court, against the EPA on a smaller aspect of this rule. But now they're going back to basically cut off the entire thing. And we should have an opinion of ruling on that by the end of this term.
There you go. Thank you, Bradley. Matthew, we are coming to you. Lawsuits are piling up against the Biden administration. We have another one here. Recent decision to, this particular one relates to a recent decision to add a popular firearm to the list of very highly regulated guns under the National Firearms Act, with the latest seeing Gun Owners of America teaming up with, once again, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Give us these details.
So Paxton and gun owners filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration's Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the ATF, adding to several other active cases before federal district courts in Texas and across the country, challenging the decision to use the Federal Registry to redefine firearms featuring pistol-style braces as short-barreled rifles. Now, short-barreled rifles are one of the categories of firearms under the National Firearms Act that are subject to, more extreme regulation than ordinary types of firearms, and that you have to pay a $200 tax, undergo a extensive background check, and sometimes it can take over a year before you're approved whenever you actually go to buy one, and then you're in the Federal Registry as listed as owning that particular firearm. And then there's all kinds of extra regulations that are involved as far as who can possess the firearm, who can shoot it, et cetera, et cetera. So the background on these pistol braces we've discussed previously in our other stories, but to kind of recap, it's something that's featured on a lot of AR-style rifles, etc., which they fall into kind of an odd realm in guns, and it's because of the peculiar history behind the National Firearms Act. Originally, the National Firearms Act, or NFA, was seeking to outlaw handguns and machine guns and suppressors. And before the act was, leading up to that, they wanted to make sure that people didn't in-run the ban on handguns, so they created this classification of gun called short-barreled rifle, so that you couldn't cut down your rifle and have a de facto handgun. Well, before the law passed, you ended up having handguns removed from it, so not subject to this heightened regulation, but the short-barreled rifle classification was left in there. Fast forward, more types of firearms are designed, so you end up with these unusual circumstances where you can have an AR-15 with a barrel shorter than 16 inches, and up until recently, the ATF said these pistol-style braces were A-OK, and that if you put it on there, we'd consider your firearm legally a pistol, which is A-OK to own, and all you have to do is just be legally qualified to own a gun. Now they're reversing course on 10 years of precedents and saying that pistol brace constitutes a short-barreled rifle, and you either have to turn it into the ATF, remove it from your firearm, or destroy your firearm, or you have 120 days to register it with the ATF, I think they're waiving the $200 tax stamp for now. And during that grace period, make it a registered SBR. So gun owners, kind of an interesting case, has teamed up with the Texas Attorney General. They say that their case is the more comprehensive case out of them all that has been filed, saying that they're arguing the extensive case precedent and history behind the Second Amendment and the case precedent recently set by the Supreme Court in the recent Bruin case. And they are also arguing that their case goes into more varied constitutional aspects, including how it violates provisions like a unconstitutional exercise of taxing authority by Congress. So none of these cases before federal district courts have been ruled on yet. It'll be very curious to see what happens, whether or not any of these courts grant the preliminary injunctions and block the rule. But all of these gun owners, plaintiffs filing these suits are very hopeful and optimistic, considering the extensive precedent that was set recently by the U.S. Supreme Court. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how those cases develop.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. A lot of Texans watching that very closely. Hayden, let's pivot to the border here. In a congressional hearing, the border chief of the Rio Grande Valley sector commented on Border Patrol operations and made some news. What did she have to say?
Congressman Tony Gonzalez questioned the recently appointed chief of the Rio Grande Valley sector, and asked her about the effectiveness of various approaches. He asked her about repatriation flights, specifically whether they are effective in deterring unlawful immigration, and she said that they are effective. He referenced specifically what happened in the Del Rio sector as thousands of Haitian illegal immigrants crossed the border, and the repatriation flights or deportation flights resumed shortly thereafter, which reduced the flow of illegal immigration in that instance. Chief Gloria Chavez also commented on another issue. I'm going to read the exact question that Gonzalez asked her. He said, "Does the Border Patrol currently have the capacity to permanently house all migrants for the entire length of their asylum process?" Her answer was, "Absolutely not, Congressman. We do not have that level of capacity in our facilities." And Gonzalez proceeded to comment on her answer, saying that it is about a 5-year time span for an asylum case to be resolved, and it could even take longer depending on where the person came from. But Gonzalez also said, quote, "That is the danger of an agency like yours that is meant to catch terrorists, fentanyl, real-time situations, and putting you into processing centers," end quote. So he was having her comment on something that has been a touchy subject in the GOP lately.
There you go. No, certainly. Asylum claims have been a sore point in the Republican caucus. What is the background of the fight over these claims among Republicans?
Well, Representative Chip Roy, as we've talked about before, introduced a bill that would require the Department of Homeland Security to either detain or expel someone in the country illegally or an asylum seeker while that case is being resolved. Roy asserted that this was merely a restatement of existing law, and it reinforced protocols similar to Title 42 expulsions. But Gonzalez came back and said that that would virtually ban asylum, in his view, because this is not possible. So it would shut down the asylum process because we can't have people here, and if they can't seek asylum and remain in the country, then they can't seek asylum at all, is Gonzalez's interpretation of Roy's bill. Democrats repeated his line about banning asylum at a recent hearing because it really lends credence to a Democratic talking point about Republicans trying to shut down asylum instead of creating pathways for people to come here legally. Democrats often say there's no line to get into as a retort to Republicans saying people should wait in line and do it the right way. But this has been an argument, a disagreement in the Republican caucus. And I frame it that way. It's really Gonzalez versus the rest of the Republican caucus. I'm sure there are some Republicans who are quietly agreeing with him, but this has primarily been him going to bat against others in his party. He was the only one in the Texas delegation who did not sign on to a border security framework that Roy was a part of and other Republicans were a part of in December. So this is an extension of this ongoing feud about immigration and border security.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your coverage. Matthew, back to you. The Washington, D.C. City Council. How do you have a city council for a district? You know what I mean?
Well, they had to call it something.
You're right. They recently passed a law allowing non-citizens to vote in their local elections, and the U.S. House of Representatives took action to pass legislation blocking this law. And notably, only 2 Texas Democrats voted to block this U.S. law. Give us those details.
Well, District of Columbia, which is governed by a city council that, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting situation. They have authority that's akin to a state legislature, but their city council, I don't know. Maybe that's a story for another day. Recently adopted a law called the Local Resident Voting Rights Act of 2021, which allows non-citizens, including those illegally present in the country, to vote in their local elections. That includes for all the offices of mayor, a DC Attorney General, City Council member, and a few other locally elected offices there that are all very powerful in the District of Columbia. Since DC is subject to federal oversight, being a federal district, Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives filed legislation to block the new law, which passed with overwhelming bipartisan support on February 9th in a 260 to 162 vote. The resolution carried support of every Republican and 42 House Democrats, notably including 2 Texas Democrats, U.S. Representative Henry Cuellar from Texas' 28th Congressional District and Representative Colin Allred from the 32nd Congressional District. We reached out to both representatives for comment and asked them why they broke from the rest of their state's delegation for their party on this, but we have not heard back. But every other Democrat from the state of Texas voted against the resolution that would ultimately block the law from going into effect. Now, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas has also filed the resolution in the U.S. Senate, which hasn't been taken up yet, last I checked. But if Congress is successful in passing the resolution, it will block the D.C. law from going into effect.
There you go. Matt, thank you for your coverage. Cameron, we're coming back to you here.
Yes.
The city of Dallas passed a local resolution. Why is it getting state level attention?
Well, Nate Schatzline and colleagues called on Ken Paxton to investigate after the city council passed a resolution that, in quotes, ensures abortion for anyone who needs it. And they are saying this is in conflict with the state law.
Okay, so is this new or what is different about this issue?
Well, as we know, a few other Texas cities have passed similar ordinances. But again, with a lot of these wedge issues, things that are going to get public attention, if you follow the citations on some of these things, you're going to get a depth of information you might not otherwise have. So with this resolution, it was citing a plan called the Action Plan for Abortion Justice. And the resolution cited this, saying, in quotes, that systemic racism, economic insecurity, and a dehumanizing immigration system are reasons to initiate these new measures. So if you follow this Action Plan for Abortion Justice and ask yourself, where does this come from? Well, it was created by a group called All Above All, and they state on their website that abortion care is available without hurdles or stigma for people of color working to make ends meet, young folks, LGBTQ, and gender nonconforming people. And they say that this action plan they developed seeks to repeal parental consent and notification requirements and remove law and immigration enforcement from medical and healthcare settings, and remove all restrictions on abortion care. So you can see how, again, following some of these citations leads you to some weird places. And now that this is getting more public attention, we're still waiting on Ken Paxton to make public comment on if an investigation is going to occur.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your coverage. Hayden, we've already talked about Congressman Gonzalez a little bit, and he seems to be making a lot of headlines lately. A local Republican party recently passed documents censuring him. What was the basis for this resolution?
Well, like you mentioned, we already talked about Gonzalez and his immigration stances, so I'll keep this brief. Congressman Gonzalez was reprimanded by the Medina County Republican Party, censuring him on account of various votes that he's taken. They took issue with his vote to certify the presidential election results in Pennsylvania and Arizona. They also objected to his support of a bill codifying same-sex marriage into federal law. They also took issue with his vote against the House rules package put forth by Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And of course, they did not like his his opposition to Roy's bill to require detention or expulsion of asylum seekers and illegal immigrants. Gonzalez, like I said, has put himself on the opposite end of many of his Republican colleagues, and this resolution claimed that he has not shown deference to Republican Party principles. The Medina County Party used Rule 44 of the Republican Party of Texas rules, which allows them to take this course of action. They accused him of, quote, lack of fidelity to our founding principles, our national and state constitutions, and the Republican Party of Texas, end quote. A couple of things I'll note. Gonzalez served in the United States Navy for 2 decades. When he retired, he was a Master Chief Petty Officer, so he has extensive military service. When he was first elected to Congress, he succeeded Congressman Will Hurd. Also, an important note, Medina County is just one of the counties in his congressional district, so this is not the entire congressional district censuring him. It's just one county in his district.
There you go. So what kind of consequences could Gonzalez face because of this resolution? Any at all?
If this resolution gained traction and the Republican Party as a whole, the Senate Republican Executive Committee adopted the censorship resolution, it is possible that in the next primary, they could endorse one of his opponents in the primary and spend money to get him out of office, which generally the RPT does not take sides in Republican primaries. But if they take a censorship action under Rule 44, then that would be permitted. But all of that isn't going to happen because one county's Republican Party did this. It would have to take the entire state party in order for there to be real consequences for Gonzalez. This is mostly symbolic at this stage, unless it gains support of the whole party.
There you go. Well, spicy stuff. We love to see, well, I say we, the press, I think, just loves to see some fun inter-party drama.
If no one ever fought, we would have nothing to do.
It's so petty, but it's my job now to delve into the petty. Oh, it's the worst, but it's delightful. Thank you for that, Hayden. Brad, the tenure of Austin City Manager Spencer Cronk came to an abrupt end this week. Fascinating. Interesting timing. Walk us through what happened.
So by a vote of 10-1, the Austin City Council terminated Cronk's employment due to its displeasure with the outages and the city's communication during them earlier this month. Some of the members were also kind of peeved that Cronk seemed to try and end around them by announcing a deal in principle with the Austin Police Association on a 4-year labor contract that occurred last week. The day before, they were set to consider a different provision for a 1-year extension. So the negotiations on that 4-year contract have been ongoing for over a year, but they stalled out in December after the two sides could not come to an agreement on the role of the Office of Police Oversight and the pay. pay raise for police officers. And so those kind of broke down, but they quickly started back up in late January, early February, and they announced this deal. Many saw it as kind of a Hail Mary by Kronk when it was clear that he might be fired because of what happened during the ice storm earlier this month. But at the meeting on Wednesday, council fired Kronk and approved the directive for a 1-year extension. However, the APA, Austin Police Association, must agree to that, and it appears to be a non-starter for the union, especially after having reached this deal in principle for a 4-year contract. And so it opens the door for even more feuding, as two competing ballot propositions concerning the Office of Police Oversight's role will come up in May. And so, what was the last one? 5 years ago, there was a dispute. 5-6 years ago, there was a dispute over the police contract, and an initially agreed upon one was torpedoed, especially by the Reimagined Policing activists. And now we're kind of back there with a couple different twists, but the more that changes, the more things stay the same.
Surprise, surprise. There you go. Where does this leave Kronk after all of this?
So he served as a city manager for 5 years, and the termination became effective Thursday. As part of his contract, he'll receive about $460,000 in severance pay. That's between a full year's salary and an amount equal to 6 months of healthcare coverage in his contract. And so he had just gotten a pay raise late last year, about $30,000.
Was the reasoning cost of living? Was it a cost of living adjustment, or what was the reason?
It was alongside. Yeah, that was part of it. It was alongside the city council pay raises that they voted on.
Okay, that's right.
And so, now they have to, rather than paying, what's 12 times 30? I don't know whatever that number is. They had to pay.
Don't look at me.
That amount more than they would have had they fired him back then. But obviously, they did not foresee this happening. So, in the meantime, council appointed Jesus Garza as the interim city manager. Garza is the uncle of current Travis County DA Jose Garza, and was the city manager the last time new mayor Kirk Watson served in the position at the turn of the century. Again, more things change, the more they stay the same. He also oversaw Watson's super PAC during the mayoral race. So I don't think he will be, likely not be made the permanent, but the city manager, but it will take like probably 10 months to find a new city manager. So he'll serve until then.
There you go. Well, we had one more story to go to, but we only have 10 minutes left, and we have a tweetery and all sorts of things to get through. So we're going to pivot to our tweetery section. Cameron, why don't you start us off? This looked really interesting. I saw it, but I've not read any articles about it or anything.
Well, there was a meteor strike here in Texas. I don't know if anyone knows that happened. Seems like there's a lot of extraterrestrial things happening.
That's what we were talking about. It's crazy right now.
UFOs, balloons. I brought up a story. Green lights coming down from satellites. So
save us, Elon Musk. You're our only hope.
Well, this is, it's just weird how everything seems to be happening all at once. I don't know if anyone has any conspiracy theories to what's going on. I'd love to hear them. But this happened early this week, and they are saying it was a meteor. There is no official reporting that it was a meteor, but that's what we have so far. They caught some things on home security videos, and the sheriff down in Hidalgo County did comment on it and say he received reports from Houston Air Traffic Control that they noticed a meteorite spotted over McAllen. So that's what we got. It I don't know.
Do you believe in aliens? Do you believe in aliens? Straight up, do you believe in aliens?
Yes.
Well, he's not saying it's aliens, but
Just the vastness of the universe. I think there's other life. Have they visited us? That's another question. I don't think so.
Have you seen the pyramids, Cameron?
That's the only explanation, right?
Have you not divided the height of the pyramids times, I don't know, whatever.
Oh dear!
Golden
Now we're
ratio.
really.
Some number and apply
Look,
some
I get
relevance
all of
to
my
it.
history
and it's aliens.
information.
No matter what you multiply and divide by, it equals aliens.
Right. Ancient aliens guy, crazy hair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Y'all sound like the guys that use the Bible to calculate when Jesus is going to return.
Yeah, it's true. Well, thank you for educating us, Cameron. We appreciate it. Let's see here. What should we do next, Brad? Why don't we go to you? What did you see?
So it is a happy week here, at least for me, because spring training is beginning.
And here, you mean there really aren't that many baseball fans in the office?
Yeah, even the guy who played college baseball doesn't give two rips about it.
Cough, cough, Cameron.
Sorry.
Sorry, Joe Hoopman. There's no camaraderie here.
Shout
I try
out.
to be supportive of Brad's baseball excitement.
Well,
Also, can we give Joe Hoopman a shout out? He's just awesome.
He's awesome.
He'll send us just really nice notes in the mail, or he'll buy us coffee in crazy weeks. It's just crazy we have support from listeners and
Hootman's
readers
awesome.
like that. But he's just like top tier.
He's the GOAT.
He's the. You should
Another GOAT.
You should explain what that is.
It's acronym for the greatest of all time.
We're not calling you a hooved little creature.
I'm sure Joe knows.
It's not happening. Maybe I didn't for a long time. Anyways, keep going, Bradley.
Speaking of GOAT, and related to baseball, I wanted to discuss Jacob deGrom, who is the best pitcher in baseball, at least as long as he's healthy. And he signed a massive contract with Phil's Texas Rangers this offseason.
Shout out Phil Burton.
Yep. They are ramping up their spending, and they're going to be a lot more fun to watch than my team this year, because my team sucks. But
Your team being the Dodgers.
yeah, that's it. I don't understand why you think that's hilarious every time you say it.
Okay, keep going.
And so, but Jacob deGrom, while he is the best pitcher in baseball, has a terrible health record. And
Tell us more.
I saw this headline from Barstool, and it reads, "It literally took 54 minutes before Jacob deGrom had to be shut down due to tightness in his left side." 54 minutes into spring training.
Man.
And he suffered a very minor injury that I think will be fine. But
So Phil's probably pretty sad.
Phil was a bit dejected, and but I think he'll be fine. But 54 minutes, that's all it took.
There we go.
Yeah.
Craziness.
I mean, if we're talking about how quickly you can get injured, I think the average person could do that. They can't throw a ball 100 miles an hour, but we could go to spring training and get injured instantly.
That's a fun topic that we should delve into one time, is like your most clumsy injury. Like, I know immediately mine. I've been on a skateboard one time because I fell and scraped myself up so badly that it freaked my parents out. I went 5 feet on the skateboard. 5 feet.
I ran over
impressive.
our cat with a bicycle, and it made me fly over the handlebars and
my
skid
God.
across the concrete.
Did the cat?
I think the cat was okay.
Wow. That's wild. Cats are
You don't
resilient,
know?
though.
It didn't seem, it came back to the house. It ran away for a while and then it came back,
Oh, okay.
and I don't
Well,
remember it being injured.
It didn't die. That's what you're...
It has since passed away.
Not in
yes.
the moment.
I
man.
was not the one who killed it.
We should talk through that sometime. That'd be a good one. Well, Brad, thanks for that. Appreciate it. We're going to pivot to some politics here. Matt, why don't you start us off?
Well, I figured we couldn't end the podcast without mentioning the big event today, and that is the State of the State address that is going to be conducted by Governor Greg Abbott. Tonight at 7 p.m., Governor Abbott will deliver the State of the State address to share his vision for the future of Texas. It's going to be broadcast on numerous TV outlets across the state, including online. If you go onto our Twitter, I actually shared a pretty nifty tweet by State Representative Dustin Burrows that provides a list of all the TV stations and online sources for the State address. So be sure to tune into that and find out what the state of the state is going to be.
Heck yeah. We'll have coverage of it. It'll be awesome. Wonderful. Thanks, Matt. Hayden, another political happening. I loved this little, again, speaking of drama, I loved this little aside from the speaker this week.
Yeah, Attorney General Paxton is apparently about to pay out a $3.3 million settlement for his many lawsuits against him, and it is said to be paid from taxpayer funds, or it's going to be paid from taxpayer funds. Speaker Phelan told CBS DFW that if Paxton wants it to be paid by the taxpayers, then he will need to come before the House Appropriations Committee and make the case for why he deserves to have this settlement paid for by the public instead of, I assume, by him or by his campaign or whatever the case may be. I don't think his campaign could pay it. It would probably have to be him who paid it, but I don't know. Speaker Phelan said he doesn't think it's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. So if Attorney General Paxton wants the taxpayers to pay it, then he'll need to convince the legislature to do it.
Oof. That'll be a fun little fight to watch. I'm going to pivot back to some non-political news. I have been absolutely riveted by the Alex Murdaugh. Well, here's the thing. It's written as Alex Murdaugh. It's pronounced Alec Murdaugh. Don't ask me why. But his trial has been ongoing for coming up on 3 weeks, if not already hit 3 weeks. It is a fascinating and awfully tragic case with lots of details, craziness going on. I'd encourage folks, if you're interested, to go to Mandy Matney's Twitter. She's the gal who's been following this in South Carolina from an independent news organization since way before this became a huge national story. So fascinating to watch and listen to like her coverage very early on, and she's continued and kind of become this big figure in true crime now that this case has become so huge. But the trial's going on. There are multiple live streams you can look up online. Essentially what happened, Alec Murdaugh is facing charges, double homicide for his wife and son. They're a prominent South Carolina legal family that has been allegedly very much part of the good old boy system in South Carolina. Not even allegedly, they just are part of the good old boy system in South Carolina. His father, grandfather, prosecutors, and have been for years in the South, particularly in this particular county in South Carolina. And he's on top of these homicide charges. He's also facing, I think, 50 something counts of fraud, which is unbelievable. So he was the attorney for dozens of people. Personal injury largely was what he delved into for these particular cases, and wrongful death, etc. Turns out he was pocketing a lot of the money. And at this point, his legal defense is not even bothering to use the word allegedly anymore in these cases. It is fascinating. There's so many details. And I've been very much riveted by the debacle.
It sounds like it.
It's fascinating.
I'm anticipating a Netflix series in a few years.
It's coming out on February 22nd in 6 days. I'm not counting that.
Is it really?
The days. Yes, literally.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Wow.
They're already on it. And
the trial's still underway, and they're already producing the Netflix special.
I mean, guys, his son was 22. His wife was also murdered. Unbelievably tragic. There's this whole boat accident that happened several years prior where his son was allegedly the driver, where a girl went missing. She was later recovered, and she had died. This is why
I don't get on boats.
It's an unbelievable story. There are multiple missing person and murders surrounding this family, and there aren't a lot of answers. It's
perhaps it was aliens.
Shocking. It could have been aliens. There you go. Perfect wrap up. But if you're interested in some insane real-time true crime, I think a lot of folks are tuned in. This is probably the biggest trial in the country right now. So fascinating. Certainly not niche, but I'm following it regardless. Highly recommend looking into it. Yeah, it's wild. It's very wild. I immediately told Hayden about this podcast because he's my true crime compatriot here.
I will say Mackenzie wrote, I'm sorry, it's Murdaugh.
Murdoch.
Murdoch.
It's written Murdaugh, but it's pronounced Murdoch. Yeah,
she
don't
wrote
know why.
Murdoch murders in all capital letters on our tweetery docket.
It's true. It's just a wild, crazy story with a lot. It's crazy. Also, the murders happened on their hunting property where they specifically have kennels for their hunting dogs. Like, this is a very wealthy, prominent family. It's very, everything about it just seems like it's out of some crazy novel, and it's real, and it's happening right now.
That's freaky when fiction is scarier, or when reality is scarier than fiction.
Yeah.
Where you're reading it, and if it wasn't real, you would think that it had been made up.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess you're part of the reason we have so many true crime TV channels.
I actually was telling y'all this earlier. I definitely enjoy true crime, but I'm not someone who can consume it all the time. It kind of depresses me. So if there's a particularly crazy case or something, I'm in the mood, I'll re-enter, but I'm not a constant consumer of any true crime podcast or TV or that kind of thing. I really enjoy it when I do partake, but I do have to be in the mood, or it has to be particularly crazy. Anyways.
In other news, Marvel's Ant-Man premieres tonight.
Really?
Mm-hmm. In 3D.
I had no idea. In 3D? Is it a new Ant-Man movie?
Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
I had no idea.
They're just making up words.
After the Avengers
It's a fun
wrapped
word.
up, it's just like,
I like it.
I just don't follow Marvel as much. It's like,
There's so many.
there are just too many, and they're not as, yeah.
And
I have a lot of opinions I could delve into.
There's a Guardians of the Galaxy coming out.
I did see
too.
that. I do love Guardians.
Yeah.
Well, I might have to go see that one. Okay, folks. Well, we have truly blathered this podcast. Thank you for listening. We will catch you next week. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you enjoy our show, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more of our stories, subscribe to The Texan at thetexan.news. Follow us on social media for the latest in Texas politics, and send any questions for our team to our mailbag by DMing us on Twitter or shooting an email to editor@thetexan.news. We are funded entirely by readers and listeners like you, so thank you again for your support. Tune in next week for another episode of our weekly roundup. God bless you, and God bless Texas.